Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk is dead wrong on Jimmy Carter. Now, I like Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk, and the title and calling out Kyle Kulinski in this way is just meant to be clickbait so that more people will watch this video and hopefully he himself watches this video as well. So, Secular Talk said that Jimmy Carter was solid on foreign policy and tried to be diplomatic. He is wrong about that because Jimmy Carter aided and abetted a genocide. Jimmy Carter did to East Timor what Joe Biden is doing to Gaza and what Donald Trump did to Yemen and what Donald Trump will continue to do to Gaza. Jimmy Carter aided and abetted Indonesia's genocide of East Timor, and when Congress passed a resolution to ban the United States from supplying weapons to Indonesia in its genocide of East Timor, Jimmy Carter and Walter Mondale went to their friend Isreal, and they had Isreal hand out U.S. weapons, Skyhawks, to Indonesia on behalf of the United States. Also, Jimmy Carter supported Chun Doo-hwan's military coup in South Korea, and Jimmy Carter also supported Chun Doo-hwan's Gwangju massacre. Jimmy Carter authorized the massacre and helped cover it up as well. Jimmy Carter massively escalated with the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union, of course, had a puppet government in Afghanistan, the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, and Jimmy Carter wanted to topple the government, so he colluded with the CIA, and they came up with Operation Cyclone. So Jimmy Carter armed and funded mujahideen, religious radicals, and he wanted to use them to overthrow the communist government in Afghanistan. And in reaction to the mujahideen causing chaos in Afghanistan, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. And so Jimmy Carter continues to use the mujahideen to fight against the Soviet Union. And so Jimmy Carter massively escalated the money and weapons given to the mujahideen, and Ronald Reagan continued that policy. Ronald Reagan did the same thing with the mujahideen. So those are just some of the terrible things that Jimmy Carter did on foreign policy. Now, Jimmy Carter on domestic policy was also horrible. Jimmy Carter was Ronald Reagan before Ronald Reagan. So Jimmy Carter deregulated the airline industry, the railroad industry, the trucking industry, and Jimmy Carter was severely anti-worker. In the same way that Barack Obama was the deporter-in-chief, Jimmy Carter was the union buster-in-chief, and the working class was furious with Jimmy Carter. So a lot of them either didn't turn out to vote for him in the 1980 election, which he lost, or they went and voted against him. Now, in the election of 1980, when Jimmy Carter lost, he got 49 electoral votes. Ronald Reagan got 489 electoral votes. So Ronald Reagan beat Jimmy Carter by a lot. Jimmy Carter lost to Ronald Reagan by a lot. By a lot. And so Jimmy Carter effectively played the role of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Jimmy Carter played the role of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Jimmy Carter governed in a way that led to Ronald Reagan, and he directly lost to Ronald Reagan. Now, Jimmy Carter also refused to codify Roe v. Wade because Jimmy Carter is personally pro-life. Jimmy Carter had a much larger supermajority than Barack Obama ever did. Jimmy Carter, back to foreign policy. On Iran, Jimmy Carter created the Iran hostage crisis. So the Iran hostage crisis was completely Jimmy Carter's fault because after the revolution in Iran, the religious fundamentalists took over, and the new government in Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, they asked Jimmy Carter to extradite the Shah, Pahlavi. So the government of Iran asked Jimmy Carter to extradite the Shah, who had been the puppet dictator of the West, and Jimmy Carter refused to extradite the Shah. The Shah had fled to the United States during the revolution, and the Shah was also receiving cancer treatment in the United States. And Jimmy Carter refused to extradite the Shah. And the Iranian government, the religious fundamentalists, the Ayatollah, they also asked Jimmy Carter to return the money that the Shah had embezzled. They also asked Jimmy Carter to return the money that the United States and the West had stolen from Iran. And Jimmy Carter refused to return any of that money, and Jimmy Carter refused to extradite the Shah. And so, therefore, the Iranian government retaliated, and the American hostages were taken. Now, of course, Jimmy Carter did try to get the hostages back with some failed, botched CIA operations, and he did negotiate with Iran to get the hostages back. And yes, Ronald Reagan went behind the government's back and colluded with Iran to have hostages released on Ronald Reagan's inauguration day. All that is true. But it is Jimmy Carter's fault for refusing to extradite the Shah and refusing to return the money that the West had stolen from Iran. And it is Jimmy Carter's fault for being escalatory and hawkish in regards to Iran, because before the Iranian Revolution, Jimmy Carter supported the Shah up until the very end. And when the situation in Iran was unstable, Jimmy Carter sent a U.S. general to Iran to tell the Iranian military to brutally suppress the protests. But the Iranian military, to their credit, refused to listen to Jimmy Carter. So that's what really happened with Iran. The Iranian hostage crisis was 100% Jimmy Carter's fault, and he should not get credit for any of it. He should not get credit for anything good. Yes, so much to talk about Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter says that he supports or opposes, Jimmy Carter says that he opposes apartheid in Israel, but that was not the case when he was actually governing. When Jimmy Carter was president of the United States, he did the Camp David Accords, which were effectively just like Donald Trump's Abraham Accords. So Donald Trump's Abraham Accords normalizes relations between Israel and the Arabs and the Gulf states, but ignores the Palestinians and screws them over. Jimmy Carter's Camp David Accords normalize relations between Israel and Egypt and screws over Palestinians because it ignores them. And in exchange for the Camp David Accords, Jimmy Carter gave Israel lots of money. Jimmy Carter increased aid to Israel by 50%, by a lot. And that's one of the many reasons why Israel is getting so much money from the United States, is because of Jimmy Carter. So Jimmy Carter can talk all about how he cares about human rights, but in reality he supported genocides and massacres and apartheid. And Jimmy Carter can talk about how much he opposes money in politics, but really he's the one who let the corporate oligarchs go free, and he's the one who started the neoliberal era. So he can talk and rehabilitate himself. Actually, he can't talk anymore because he's dead, but yes, he can talk as much as he wants about. The thing about Jimmy Carter is that he's lived for 43 years after his presidency. 43 years, 11 months. Presidency ended January 20th, 1981, and he died December 29th, 2024. So he lived for 43 years and 11 months after his presidency, so he was able to lie a lot and rehabilitate his image. And the thing about Jimmy Carter that's different from Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and Joe Biden is that Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama are not self-aware, and they're very out of touch. And Jimmy Carter, he's not self-aware. He didn't acknowledge any of the bad things he did or take responsibility, but he was smart enough to realize that people hated him, so he did his best to rehabilitate his image. And so whatever publicity stunts he did, just however good he pretended to be, he was terrible. Jimmy Carter was Ronald Reagan before Ronald Reagan. Jimmy Carter was Bill Clinton before Bill Clinton. Jimmy Carter was Barack Obama before Barack Obama. And Jimmy Carter was awful, terrible, and Kyle Kulinski is really wrong, and I hope he watches this video. But no. Secular Talk and Kyle Kulinski are very likable and very honest, so this is just clickbait to make him watch this video. Also,